Although its name rings of gentility, the Brookside Women's Club is not your usual bridge-playing, cocktail-partying, gardening variety of women's club, where members get together and cluck over the shine of each other's china. Instead, at the regular monthly meetings of the club, you might hear laughter, a few cuss words, and songs that go something like this. You take a scab and you kill it, and you put it in a skillet, and you fry it up a golden brown. That's union cooking, and it's mighty fine. Then you might hear Miss Lois Scott of nearby Cumberland stand up and say something like, "When I get a hold of a scab and whop him, that really does me good. I even whopped a gum thug once, right as he was pulling his gun out." In 1974, this is how the New York Times introduced Lois Scott to the world. 2 years later, she'd be one of the key figures in the Oscar-winning documentary Harlan County, USA. Before I even bought a podcast mic to do this show, I knew I had to talk about Lois, and I knew exactly who I wanted to talk about her with. She may not have an Oscar, but the following she has amassed on social media by correcting the narrative of Appalachia and rural folks in general has been amazing to witness. I hope you'll enjoy listening to Danielle Kirk and I gab not only about Lois, but also accents, stereotypes, and the systemic challenges of this place we both call home. So we're both fresh off a rewatch of Harlan County, USA. And you actually watched it with your daughters, which I think is great.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk about one of the most prominent figures featured in Harlan County, USA. If you've never seen Harlan County, USA, I 100% recommend it. You don't need to watch it to listen to this podcast, but it is one of the best films ever made, in my opinion. It's about a miners' strike in Harlan County, the Brookside mine, in the early 70s. But what really stands out in the movie is the women of the film. And there are so many women on the front lines of this strike organizing, but there's one that really sticks out to me, and that's Lois Scott, and that's who we're here to talk about today. I'm really excited to talk to you about this because watching your TikTok videos, which is where I first even got sort of familiar with you, I'd heard your name and stuff, but having your videos come up and you're literally just giving an education to people on TikTok.
Yeah.
About union matters in Eastern Kentucky, organizing, mining, all the extractive sort of practices of these coal companies. So I was like, if I'm talking about Lois Scott, I got to talk to Danielle. Before we get started, really diving into what happened in the Brookside strike, I just want to give a little bit of background on her earlier years. So Lois grew up in Benham, which is in Harlan County. It's got a deep mining history there, like many places in Eastern Kentucky. She grew up in Benham. She was there for many, many years, just with her family. But there's not much of her early when is out there, other than she came from a union family. She has talked a little bit in the past about, when she was alive, she talked a little bit about how her family was so strong in the union. Her dad was part of battles in the 1930s that Harlan County, got their name of Bloody Harlan for, because he was fighting for the union at that time. He was a coal miner. So she always had a union presence in her family. And it remained strong, obviously, throughout her whole life. But she did leave Eastern Kentucky when she was 15. So she went to Baltimore. She left school, went to Baltimore, and her sister told her, "You can go here and get a babysitting job for $35 a week in Baltimore." And at that time, her family didn't really have much money, and she felt she was costing her family more money than what, she needed to do her part. So at 15, she went to Baltimore to get a babysitting job. But she did not get a babysitting job. She lied about her age, and this was during World War II. So she lied about her age and ended up working in an aircraft factory for the Navy. So she started, well, she said she had many different jobs there, but what she ended up, her final job that she had the longest was a grease monkey is what she called it. She was a grease monkey. So she was wearing coveralls and doing all the mechanical stuff. And, as I've said before on this podcast, many people from the region helped win that war, and she's part of that. Now, in Baltimore, she lived with her sister, and her sister was older than her, and they lived together. But she described herself as really patriotic, and she would write to people in the service, men that were serving. And she was writing to this one guy, and he was in Florida. And then she sneaks away from Baltimore. She totally disguises herself, buys new clothes, puts on new makeup, gets new jewelry, disguises herself, and goes down to Florida and marries this man. Now, he was from, all his family's from Whitesburg. So what's unclear to me is, if she knew him beforehand.
Or had, heard of him.
Or had heard of him, they had some sort of connection. It's not really, clear in the research that you do about her how they knew each other, what that connection was, other than these letters that she was writing. So she goes down to Florida, they get married, and then they move. He gets discharged from the service. He'd been injured. He gets discharged, and they actually move to Letcher County in eastern Kentucky. So they're there for a short time, but he can't find work. There was some stuff that this is also unclear, but her husband at some point was trying to organize a union for theater projectionists or something like that in that area. And I'm not sure if that's where he was working. Either way, he couldn't find work for a long time. So he moved to Indiana, left her behind. Now, this is her first marriage, and her husband was abusive towards her. She tells a story, in some of the research that I've done, she tells a story about they found out she voted Democrat, and he slapped her. Yeah. So, and his family was also abusive towards her, so he went to Indiana and left her there, and she was just living with his family and kind of suffering through it. So she decided that she was going to go to Indiana. So she told him he couldn't find work up there. He kept saying he couldn't find work. So she's like, I'm coming to Indiana. So she had to leave her kids back in Letcher County. She goes up to Indiana. She said, I found a job within 3 days. I don't know why he couldn't find a job.
Because he's a bum.
That's sort of the impression I was getting from what I was reading, but it was never concluded research that he was a scrub. But so she finds a job at a department store there, and she started saving money to leave her husband. She started saving back money to leave her husband. Eventually, she divorces him and goes back to Harlan County. She divorces him in November. It's finalized in November of 1962. By February of 1963, she's married again. She marries another man.
Dang, girl.
I mean, she's a lover. So she gets married in 1963. Her husband then, he's having trouble finding work. The mines aren't operating like they were. It was sort of a bust period in eastern Kentucky. So they actually end up moving to Baltimore again. So she goes back to Baltimore because he has family there. They go to Baltimore, and she got a job again at another department store. She gets a job as an assistant manager. So the way she put it, she's like, I was company. I was working for the company. She distinguishes that to say she felt like a company boss, but she found out that the cashiers were trying to unionize, and they were scared to talk to her about it. And she's like, you don't need to be scared to talk about it to me. Because what she had found out, she also obviously had this strong union history in her family. But what she'd also found out is the department store that she worked for would never hire a woman as a manager. They told her, you will be an assistant manager. As long as you work here, we're never going to have a woman manager. So she hears that the cashiers are trying to unionize. So she starts helping them. She's like, yeah, you need a union. You need better pay. She finds out that the department store across the street is already unionized, and they're getting paid way more than what the cashiers where she works is making. So she starts helping them unionize. What ends up happening is they find out and they all get laid off. She gets fired from this department store, and she wanted to move back to Harlan County anyway. And she also was wanting to leave her second husband. She was wanting out of that marriage too. Her dad sent her some money to she made the trip back to Harlan County. And then she came back officially, like brought her kids back, and then was in Harlan County for good. So she has this very rich history way before the Brookside mine strike. She comes from a deep Union family. She's had all this sort of history building up to that Brookside mine strike. And then she finds out that the strike is happening at Brookside. That strike, the Brookside mine strike, starts in 1973. And it lasts over a year.
Yeah.
She finds out that they're striking, and she has no family that's working for the mine or anything like that. But her husband was working for a mine in Lynch, or had worked for a mine in Lynch. And she knew how much they got paid because they were union. So she thought to herself, if I know how important a union is, and I can do anything to help somebody else get one, then what kind of person am I if I don't go out on the picket line and support them? So she had no real personal ties to this strike. She just felt like
that's her community. Like, she's going to step in and do what she knows how to do for her community.
Exactly. So she's like, I got to go out there and help them fight. So then that's when we get to Harlan County, USA. Actually, before we even get to Harlan County, USA, one thing to know is that she was arrested 3 times during the Brookside strike. She was arrested 3 times. And the first time she gets arrested, they take her down to the jail and they ask her what her name is. And she says, Martha Washington.
This girl.
And they're like, come on, your name ain't Martha Washington. What's your actual name? And she said, well, you can't prove that my name isn't Martha Washington. So as long as I keep saying it is, that's what you got to write down, ain't it? And they said, yeah, they stopped arguing with her. So they put down Martha Washington. Now, she's not the only person. Melba Strong, who had also been on that picket line, got arrested with her. Then when they asked Melba what her name was, she said Betsy Ross. So before this arrest, there had been no national coverage or local coverage because the newspaper was bought by the coal company. There had been no news coverage of the strike. But when they did that, the headline said, Martha Washington and Betsy Ross arrested at the picket line in Harlan County.
Well, that's one way to do it.
That's one way to get that attention. And then a film crew comes in and starts filming Harlan County, USA. Thinking about her in Harlan County, USA, I mean, throughout the film, like you can tell she knows what she's doing. And if you were to watch the movie and not have any background on her, you would think like,
she's got blood on the line.
She's got blood on the line. Right. Somebody in her family is working at Brookside. But that wasn't the case. And before I did sort of a deep dive on her, that's what I always assumed.
I did too. I thought it was like her son or her husband. Or like, I was like, this girl's got somebody in that mind that she is like out here doing everything she can to make sure that they're safe and to make sure that they get, a fair contract, like she said.
But that wasn't the case. It was just her. She knew she had the skills that were needed to help organize this. So they start the Brookside Women's Club, which is the women's group that you see featured throughout the film so much. And they're organizing with the miners. And it seems to me from the film, they were really the ones that knew how to take action and what action to take in order to push the company into getting what they want, a fair contract. With all that background, I do want to ask you, like, in the film, what sort of things stood out to you about the way that she was organizing people?
Well, I think, like, the really pivotal part of it all was bringing in the women, because we can sit back and look like women are the movers and shakers of their home. Like, we keep the home going. And at that time, a lot of those women were homemakers in a sense, but they realized how important their husband's safety was for them to be able to even keep a home. You know what I'm saying? So they all came together because they realized how important that was for their everyday lives. And I think bringing all the women in and creating this club that focused on how they can be used was a really key part to their success in the end. And then Also, I think another really big part of the story is when they realized no matter how we go about this, we're getting pushback. Whether we try to be nice about it, they're not going to give us anything we want doing this nicely. They are being violent towards us. And sometimes, you can do things and ask for things and have success, but then sometimes you have to demand it and meet that with what you're being met with, And I think that was a key part in turning things in their favor too.
Yeah, there's this really key moment in the film for me when they have the car blocking Basil Atkins, I believe is his name. They have the car blocking Basil and all of his men.
The scabs.
And they can't get out. I can't remember where they're trying to go.
I think they're trying to go to work.
Yeah.
They're going in that day, and they pushed that car into the road, and they're like, you're not, you can try to run us over, but this car is stopping you from getting in there. Yeah, they were trying to get in.
They knew that he had a gun, so they also showed up with guns. I don't think no one wanted to shoot anybody, but at the same time, like you were saying, they were going to meet them with what they were being met with.
Well, because a couple of days before that, the women had showed up early, and they had been literally, what they said in the movie was like sitting ducks. Like, our wives are sitting ducks. And, I think at that point, when they had seen, we have gone about this the way we're legally supposed to, but they're being allowed to do this towards us. They're allowed to shoot at us when we're standing in a legal spot on the picket line. They're shooting at us. And I think when the men realized our wives are and there was a guy that talked about it in the movie. He was like, they're supporting us and we're not supporting them. And the next day, that's when they met violence with violence. They talked about it multiple times in the movie because, like you said, Harlan County has like a very deep, rich history in unions and striking. And they talked about the 1930s. Like, we don't want this to end up like Bloody Harlan. We don't want it to go back to that, but we're going to get a fair contract.
So Lois plays a really important part here because she's having this interaction with the sheriff. She said at that time, this is hard to believe, but at that time, Harlan County was 4-1 Democrat. The sheriff was actually a Republican. And she said that the strikers had supported him for sheriff. And she said for the most part, he had agreed not to sort of come down and arrest them and
interfere with what
was going on because he was supporting them. But she said because they had blocked the car in the road, they sort of pushed him against the wall and they're like, this is your duty to go get this car out of the road. There was a warrant for Basil. So they pull that out when the sheriff comes down. Lois pulls it out and was like, there's a warrant for his arrest because he, like you had mentioned, he'd been shooting at people. So there's a warrant for his arrest. And she doesn't budge until she makes sure that sheriff is going to take Basil to jail. There was no violence at this point. Guns were cocked and they were ready, but nothing ended up happening. The sheriff takes Basil to jail. She has said that she was prepared to do whatever they need to do, but I also think like she shows a particular strength there in not overreacting, not being just not shooting the first shot or something, and making sure that she did say like, why aren't you taking him in a police car? Because he was allowed to drive himself down to the jail.
Yeah.
Nothing really came of it, but that was sort of an action like she won. She felt like that felt good, that he was actually getting some sort of penance for what he had done, but that could have ended a lot differently. And I think because it was the women there on the line and because they had a leader like Lois, it was not as bad as it could have been. And she said before, like, I'm shocked we didn't have as much bloodshed as we did in this strike as we did in the 30s. But what gets me is like, I don't think she realizes that maybe she was the reason.
Well, like when all that happened, like you said, they were ready to do whatever they needed to do. But her stepping up and saying like, actually, he needs to be put in jail because of something that he's already done. Like he was seen as the leader for the opposition. So once you take that out, then everybody else is just going to sort of scatter. And I think she knew that. Like, I think maybe herself being a leader for her group and the union side, I think she knew, like, hey, if we take out their leader and who they're following, because he would lead them in every single day to work. She knew, like, hey, if we target him and we remove him from the picture, then that's just going to weaken what they've got going on. They're not going to go on their own. Right. They're only, they're following the leader. So I agree with what you're saying. Like, I think she played a pivotal part in nothing really ending as violent as it could have.
And I think her experience with her family, with her dad, seeing how violent that fight was, like I said, she was ready to do what had to be done. But at the same time, I think having that prior experience, whether she ever realized it or not, was so helpful in that not being a worse outcome than it could have been. Now, a year into the strike, Lawrence Jones was fatally shot during one of these standoffs. And after his death, I don't know if you would call it like a white flag or something. A contract is eventually the outcome for this. They were denying them the right to join UMWA. They wanted a contract. They wanted to be union. And Lawrence getting shot and killed sort of pushed Duke to sign that contract and let them be union. Lois was very vocal about people that didn't show up on the picket line.
Yeah, because she realized, like, if we look like 2 or 3 little peons out here standing, they're not going to take us seriously. You have to have strength in numbers. Like, you have to stand in solidarity with your neighbor, with your family, with your friends, in order for them to take you seriously. And, I think, like you said, due to her past experience with this sort of thing, she could see, like, they aren't taking us seriously because we've got 2 or 3 people standing out here every day. Mm-hmm. If there's 100 people that work at this mine, there should at least be 20 or 30 of, whether it's your wife or your cousin or yourself. Like, there should be somebody representing every single miner out here in some capacity. And if we don't have that, then they are going to say, well, they don't even support each other. Why should we give them the contract? Why should we support them? And I think that was like a really key part of her organizing strategy, was recognizing, like, we need everybody out here.
And I think she also understood the long term, like mentioned, she did not have any family working in the Brookside mine, but she saw the long term goal for what it was. If this mine is going to be operating, it needs to be a union mine. That's because these aren't going to be the only miners working in this mine. There were teens then that would probably end up working in the mine, and she knew they'd be better off union. She saw the full picture, where I think some people just saw what was in front of them. And I think that's what made her such a good organizer, and what made her, stand out in the film and just so capable of leading not only the women, but the miners themselves in this strike.
Well, like, I think you're right. She did see a bigger picture. Not only was it the men who were there at that time, but their sons, their nephews, their grandsons. And they even mentioned that, like, it's not just about us. It is about everybody who comes after us. And also recognizing that when these men go to work in dangerous situations, our whole town is at risk of catastrophic events, specifically talking about when there was the explosion that had happened. And I think tying that into, like, this is a safety concern, and unionizing this mine not only prevents the men who are in there, but the people who live around the mine. And I think that goes back to, like, the whole big picture of things, realizing how unionizing in an effort, or fighting to unionize in an effort for safety, isn't just about who's underground at that specific time, but the people who come later and the people that live around it.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes her just, I would love to talk to her today.
Oh, no.
Like, R.I.P., amazing woman. I would love to talk to her today, because that sort of thinking is just so, I don't want to say ahead of its time, I don't want to say she's some sort of pioneer, right? Because people in Eastern Kentucky have been unionizing since way, way back, obviously. So it wasn't that she was the only person that ever thought this way, I guess, but it's like she had such an understanding that I think would be so beneficial for the things we're seeing today.
Yeah.
I think even at that time she understood the long-term effects because her dad died from black lung. And her dad was, so upset because he knew that once he died from black lung, his family would suffer because they wouldn't get his pension anymore. There were no black lung benefits at this time. So she arranged for, I think it was her kids or her sister's kids or something to be adopted officially by her parents, because then when he passed, they would get government benefits for the kids. She saw the long-term strategy and how to take care of people. And that's such a key thing, I think, sort of in community organizing, understanding like intersectionality and all those things. Like she and Eula Hall is another one, just sort of understood those pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like going back to the things, like her recognizing how important this was, I feel like it's because she knew what it meant to live like without it in the first place, in the 20s and 30s, when her dad and her, past generations before her were fighting. She knew what the violence could look like because those stories were passed on. And she knew what it was like to live without those protections and without policies in place that do things like make sure your family continues to draw your pension if you die from this horrible disease that took out so many of our loved ones. And I think that's why accurate storytelling and representation in Appalachia needs to continue to be told. Whether it aligns with the groupthink of the time or not, these are stories that need to be told.
Right.
And if we fail to do that and fail to keep truths that we know happened, lives that we know people lived, and the things that they did, that's how we end up with a lot of things that we're seeing today.
It's no secret that at this point, it's not like unions are very popular in the region. They're few and far between.
My husband's in a union.
Okay, well, okay.
And even at that, like the level of organizing that goes behind him, it's just like, I just want to shake him sometimes. I'm like, what are y'all doing? Like, why would you sign this? This is awful.
Yeah.
But it's like a lot of, so for a little bit of backstory, when my husband got his job that he has currently, which is a blue-collar job in Eastern Kentucky that's not mining, he had never been in a union before, never realized like how significant it was or really knew anybody that was in a union before him. I come from Mingo County. Like, I know what a union is. And
West Virginia.
Yes.
Mingo County, West Virginia.
Yes. So I know what a union is. I know what that meant, how that benefits the entire group or the entire community when you have those protections and things like that. So when he would tell me stuff and he's like, well, I just don't want them holding this money out of my check, and like not understanding, like, yes, they withhold that money, but in the end, that is to represent you should you need it. Or he would say things like, well, such and such doesn't want to be part of the union because he said he doesn't think he should get paid as much as the same amount as such and such. And I'm like, that's not how that works. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, yes, you signed this contract, but it's to honor each other. It's supposed to be like a brotherhood. You're saying, I'm not going to let you do wrong to this person, or I'm not going to let you do wrong to this person, no matter what should come. And then there came a time that he needed the union, and he needed his union representatives to represent him against somebody who at the time was the company. They were coming after his job. When he seen his union rep and he recognized like they knew how to navigate the legal spaces and they knew what language meant, the way that they try to, hoodoo people and things like that, he was like, we really do need these guys because I would have lost my job without them. And I'm like, I've been telling you. And ever since then, he's like going to all the meetings and like speaking up about stuff and being all part of it. And I was like, so many people think like the union is like this mythical like little bubble. And I'm like, no, you are the union. If you are part of the union, you are the union. There's no big guy coming in to save the day. You save each other. And you are signing that saying, I'm saving you, you save me. They can't fire us all and keep making the money that they're making. They can't, come after our health care and continue to make the money that they're making. And when they break this, we aren't going to work. You're not going, I'm not going. We're not letting them profit off of our suffering. These were all things that I would tell him, but until it came time to need that, it was like a light bulb went off. And I was like, I've been telling you, John. I've been telling you.
Individualized thinking runs rampant, I think, in America, just the way we've all been taught. Individual prosperity is so important. Thinking about anything other than yourself is not valued as much anymore, I don't think. I think that's sort of how unions have come sort of out of favor. I know some people that absolutely hate unions. They're like, what has a union ever done for me? I've heard that so many times.
Yeah.
What has a union ever done for me?
That's basically saying, what have I ever done for me if you're part of it?
I know. It's you get what you give it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that people understand the power that they have when they're active in a union, or even outside of a union. If you're active in organizing, if you're active in your community, there's so much more power there than what people think, because I think they've been taught that they have no power and they just need to look out for themselves and protect themselves. Lois Scott is a brilliant example of this, I think. She knew the power of the people and got the people together. And again, not personally affected by this, other than it was happening in Harlan County, and she lived in Harlan County. But she really thought more of the group other than herself,
Yeah, I think, like you were saying, that individualized thinking, that is something that, if you look throughout history in Appalachia, is relatively new.
Absolutely.
It's not something that has always been a thought. And I don't know really when it took off or when that was something that started to be like heavily pushed and perpetuated in this region, but that's not something that, like I said, historically was things people thought. Me. It's always been, how do I help my neighbor in this situation? How do I help my friend? How do I help my community? And a lot of things have been community focused because we realize when our community is cared for, we all benefit. So I think that translated over into the union because they seen, oh, well, I do this for my community, or I take vegetables that I grow in my garden to the school, or, I'm feeding this person with things, and we're taking care of each other and we're all better for it. So that, like I said, I think translated over into union organizing and the way the union operated at that time. Now, what happened? I think we all kind of can speculate and see where things started to deteriorate, but I think we're coming to a point where, whether you like it or not, it's going to be critical to depend on your community again. And if you want or end up needing to depend on your community, you're going to have to be there for others too.
And we've seen it happen already, right? We've seen it happen with all the climate catastrophe that's happened in the region.
Oh, yeah.
Over the last couple years. I do think about the teachers union, both in Kentucky and in West Virginia, and how much power they have and how they've shown that power in the last few years by striking. Both states, all of their teachers went on strike because they were cutting their benefits. That's sort of maybe the strongest union presence we have at this point in Kentucky, at least. And I don't know as much about if you know more about the West Virginia strike, I don't know as much about it. But I know they all went on strike as well.
Yeah, West Virginia was like the first where every county had went on, like it was a statewide thing. Because they were trying to change, it was things like their retirement and their healthcare plans and things like that. And they were like, oh, heck no. We've seen this story before and you're not doing it to us. Like, we know how this thing goes. That was around the time, I want to say it was about 9 or 10 years ago, because my oldest is 9 years old. That's how I know. And I was still like really, I still keep up with a lot of things that happen in West Virginia, but I had just recently moved across into Kentucky. So I was like getting pieces from my friends and family in West Virginia, as well as like hearing rumblings of things that are like picking up in Kentucky around the same time, because it's follow the leader. You know what I'm saying? If one particular group can fight to remove the benefits and the health care and all this stuff, then somebody else is just going to say, oh, well, they got by with it, so we can do it to ours too. And in the same sense as the oppressive entities doing that, the people realized, like, oh, well, if they're organizing like this in West Virginia, why can't we in Kentucky? Or if they're organizing like this and it ended up like multiple states across the country followed suit with what teachers in Appalachia were doing. And I think that really sent a message across the nation. And I wish more people valued it for what it was.
I mean, if you think about the Kentucky strike, that led to Matt Bevin not being reelected, Andy Beshear as governor. I mean, that is directly because of the teacher strike.
Yep.
And Andy Beshear's been governor for however many years. And that's not to say like choosing sides or whatever, but like that is, I mean, I am choosing sides, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not to say, I don't want to get into the politics of all that right now. The direct action of the teacher strike led to Matt Bevin losing that election and Andy Beshear becoming governor. And to me, it was a reminder of how much power there is in numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, again, I know this podcast is to focus on women of Appalachia, but I think we would be like talking about teachers union. We would be remiss if we did not recognize that most teachers are women.
Yeah.
And that is women organizing. I think it just goes to show you that women know how things move and operate in society. And when we listen to women, we all benefit a little bit more.
100% agree. Keep listening to us, specifically this podcast. No, I mean, yes, please. I think without even, we're not, I'm sort of, in real time, you're not making those connections to the past, right? The teachers were not thinking about, oh, this deep history of unionizing and union work and organizing in Eastern Kentucky, in Appalachia. It was, oh, hell no. And we have a union, we have power. And that's what Lois Scott was fighting for. She knew if they had a union, they'd have power.
There's one part in the movie where, what's his name with the bushy eyebrows? Was it John L. Lewis? His last name is Lewis. I know that because my stepmom talked about his bushy eyebrows. She said it. Okay, so this is like side note. The beginning of the film, the old man singing, that's my great-grandpa.
Nimrod?
Yes.
Girl, this is a whole conversation. Nimrod Workman is your great-grandfather?
Yes, that's my stepmom's dad. Okay, and she tells me stories of him all the time, like how silly, goofy he was and stuff like that. And she said, I remember being a little girl and we would go to his house. And she said there was the TV, and one side of the TV was a picture of Jesus Christ. And then on the other side of the TV was the Lewis guy. I'm pretty sure his name is John L. Lewis. And she said, I remember being a little girl, I'd sit there and look at his eyebrows and I'd say, man, there were some freaky looking eyebrows.
It is John. Yeah.
Okay. So anyways, in the beginning of the film, he's talking about like, if you do not have your brothers, you have nothing. If you don't have organized labor,
John
you
Lewis.
Yes, like you are fully exposed to be exploited. They are going to pick you off one at a time,
right?
Basically.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to talk about once the contract is signed and they achieve their goals and things like that, they talk about how they fought and how they were all willing to do whatever it took to protect each other on the picket line, but also make sure that they got that contract to protect each other at work. And again, it just really reiterates the fact that like you do have strength in numbers.
Yeah.
And, I think so many people miss the mark when they are feeding into this me mentality. And it sucks.
Well, it does suck. I want to talk about how, like I said, the reason I wanted to talk to you about Lois Scott is because I think she was a brilliant organizer. And I also noticed in that movie how much more educated people were going into these union votes, contract votes. I don't know that, like you said with your husband, he's like, didn't really understand why the union mattered. But what you've done, I think so brilliantly online, is you've really passionately taken the time, as you were saying, like this history, this rich history in Appalachia, you've really taken the time to sort of educate people across probably the globe. I don't know what your demographic looks like on TikTok.
It's everywhere. Yeah, it definitely is everywhere.
So you've really educated people across the globe because obviously there is this horrible stereotyping of people from Appalachia. We all, if you're from here, you know about it. Like, we're hillbillies. I've had people.
And we are, but don't you dare say it if you're not from here.
100% correct. Please. I mean, actually, if people call me a hillbilly at this point, I don't really care. I'm like, yes, and? Do you have something else to say? Because if that's supposed to be an insult, I'm taking it back. That's my whole movement. Take back the hillbilly. Somebody calls me a redneck. Oh my God, couldn't have a better compliment, honey.
Like, do you know what you just said?
Exactly. I'm like, please, yes. Give me my handkerchief, honey. Call me redneck again. Love it. Anyway, sorry. But what you've done so brilliantly is like you have taken TikTok and you have just started sort of educating people about the area and breaking those stereotypes. And people don't understand why this area is what it is. I mean, we are a very poor region, but that is by design.
Yeah.
What got you into this? What got you on TikTok? What got you spitting facts?
Actually, I hate whenever people say this because it does sound so freaking corny, but I did not get on TikTok to be an influencer or to really do anything other than I was utilizing that as a space to share my sewing. I used to sew and I had a full-blown business, and that's what allowed me to stay at home with my kids. Okay? That's what I got on TikTok for. And due to
sort of like advertising that business? Okay.
Yeah. And due to the stereotypes and a lot of the things that are said towards us, I was very hesitant to ever go live or share like actual voiceovers of me. I would use I would say something and then use the little filter that kind of makes you sound like a little chipmunk or whatever. I would change my actual voice on the app or just use music over my videos. And one day I was just like, you know what, the hell with this. I'm not editing my voice anymore. And I don't remember if it was because I had seen something like a infographic or something like that. And again, this was around the time that Hillbilly Elegy, the movie. So it's like we're seeing like all of these terrible things that are being shared and said and stuff like that. So eventually I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And I would post voiceovers, which led to people making comments about my accent. And at first, like, there would be like these sort of passive aggressive things like, oh, we can't even understand what you're saying. Or, you know what I mean? Like, really not polite.
You better get those captions on, girl.
Right. Well, even the captions get a lot of things that I say wrong.
Same here. Yeah.
So I would get like little passive aggressive snippy comments here and there. And then one day somebody just said something to me and they must have just caught me on a bad day because I was like, you know what? To hell with y'all. Like, you're about to really get it. And then there was just like this response from people who were from here had seen the video because the way the like algorithm works, I guess it just was pushed onto the side of the algorithm that people from here would see.
I think place has a lot to do with it, yeah.
So if you talk about a certain place, like that's where they target those, to be able to see it. And there was just like so many people that were like, I'm so glad you finally said this. Like, I'm so glad. And I think it was just like, I told him that there was nothing wrong with the way that I talk. And it's like talked about regional dialect and, things like that. And I don't even have I have an accent. I'm not naive to the sense that I do. But I don't even have as thick of an accent or as like rich of an accent as some people.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So, like, I went to school for media, and in doing that, they try to work that accent out of you a little bit, actually. I would record, and I'm like, even now, I feel like my accent's not that thick. And then people would be like, you got to speak clearer, honey. You got to be clear. And I'm like, what do you want me to do?
The people who need to hear what I have to say can hear me and understand me fine. That's what I feel like saying.
Right. And if you come here, you're going to be the one with the accent. It ain't going to be us.
Right.
If an outsider comes here, this is a pet peeve of mine and a little bit of a sidebar, but when outsiders come in and make a comment about my accent, I just want to be like, what accent? Because you're the one that sounds different here.
Yeah.
And it's just coming in with that mentality, it just feels like it's a better than you kind of thing, you know?
Well, and the thing that frustrated me the most about that was the fact that, like, I would never look at somebody from New Jersey and say that they sound awful.
Right.
That's their accent. That's the way that they talk. Or I would never, like, there's a Valley, California, you know, like, they have an accent to me. Where I live, I don't have the accent.
Right.
You do. You know what I'm saying? But that kind of opened the door, and people were like, well, I didn't even know, like, where's Appalachia even at, or what is this, or what is that? And people would say stuff about, like, oh, well, everybody that lives there is poor. And I'm like, excuse me. You know, the very first video that I made that was talking about labor, organizing, and these exploitative industries was me specifically talking about my hometown. I'm from Williamson, West Virginia. And the slogan on all of the signs is the heart of the billion-dollar coal field. But you go there today, and where's the billions of dollars? Right. That got ripped out of these mountains by our ancestors' blood, sweat, and tears, and went and propped up these rich folks in the city, and they don't even put those connections together. They're looking at me like I'm poor and I'm uneducated while they sit where they sit, not acknowledging that my ancestors is the reason that they have everything that they have in the city. So I made a video talking about generational wealth, and then that led to talking about generational poverty and the things that people here fought for and the way they organized to get that accomplished, which kind of turned political over time because, I mean, as much as we don't really want to get into the thick of things, organized labor is political. It just is.
It is.
And, you know, it translates over into that aspect of things. And then you have people who are like, well, I don't really want to get political about it. Everything is political.
Every single thing. Every decision you make is political.
It is. So, you know, I tried to focus away from the blame. I don't like to put blame on this person or this party or that party. I don't, because I know that Appalachia has been seen as a resource for everyone all throughout history. And being from West Virginia, the poorest state in the country, I know that the reason for that dates back to before West Virginia was even a state. That is a fact. And so many people look at things today and say, oh, well, that's your fault. Or you're the least educated state in the country. Or you're the poorest state in the country and you have the worst health. And it's like, these are all systemic issues of a greater thing. What is that greater thing? Can we say it?
Say it.
Capitalism. So it is the need to take and suck as much out of regions like Appalachia, from the natural resources to the people themselves.
There's, at the beginning of Harlan County, USA, Nimrod Workman, your
great-grandpa,
your great-grandfather, love that revelation, but your great-grandfather, Nimrod Workman, says, he's telling this story about working in the mines and working the mules, I believe.
Yeah.
And they tell him, don't put that mule anywhere that it might cave in. We don't want that mule to get injured. And he said, well, what about me?
We'd have to buy a new mule. We can go out any day and find another man. So our lives here have been seen as less than a mule, worth less than a mule.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I think mules are some powerful beasts, but they do not compare to a human life. But in the eyes of these coal companies and these coal lords, they were, because they had to buy that.
It also shows you how little they were paying people to work in those mines if they were more concerned about purchasing a mule than paying a miner's wage.
Yeah.
It's really just, when you start thinking about it so deeply, it's just on so many levels. I mean, at that time, I'm sure he was getting script anyway.
Yeah. So, again, this is a sidebar, but he started when he was like 9 or 10 years old in the mines. And he was like the door, like he stood at the door and would open, you know what I mean? And then eventually it ended up turning into like he was actually a miner.
Yeah.
But my stepmom has told me stories that he would tell her about how he would be paid and he would leave thinking like, that's all I get. You know what I mean? Like, that's all. Then just the inability to actually do anything with it, to spend it where you want or to do anything with it. It had to be
at something the coal company owned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the craziest thing about it, he was 90 some years old when he died. That man never got his black lung benefits. Never. And he had black lung.
Yeah. Yeah.
But never got his benefits. But he never betrayed the union in spite of that. He never, because he knew what it was like to grow up without it, to fight for it, and what would happen if they took it away. And I feel like we're, 2 generations away from that now? But these stories are just lost to time. That people are like, well, what's the union ever done for me?
Right. And I think that's by design, right?
Yeah. The loss of education, it not being part of our story, it goes back to washing history and cleaning it up and trying to make it look shiny and something that it's literally not. It's not taught. If we don't teach it to our kids, it doesn't get taught. If you don't teach it to yourself, you don't know. That is, like you said, it's by design.
And I mean, that's how you end up with Kentucky being a right to work state.
Yeah, because, and they twist the legislation around and like use these words like, oh, right to work. Like I have the right to decide when I work. No, that's not what that means, big dog. Like it means something that the complete opposite.
Yeah. It means they have the right to fire you for whatever they want to fire you for.
Yeah.
And they don't really have to tell anybody what it is.
Yep.
Going back to Lois, like I think that she truly, and women like her, were seeing this for what it was, how companies were manipulating the story, how they were manipulating these men. I think you, too, have seen how this manipulation has happened due to your interactions on TikTok with people and just people not really understanding. You know, I think Harlan County, USA came out in 1976. It won an Academy Award.
Yeah.
It's an amazing film. And most people, when I talk about these things with people, a lot of people I encounter have not seen Harlan County, USA, or they're like, that was so long ago, like, it's different now. It's not that different.
No, the story of America is the story of America, whether you go back to the 1800s or you go to present day. It's literally the story of taking, using people for what you can, and then people saying, I've had enough of this, time and time and time again. And the thing is, there's so many valuable lessons that we can learn from women like Lois. Not just organizing, but in the fact that we do have to look and see the bigger picture so many times. Instead of getting pigeonholed on this one concept or this one idea, we have to zoom out sometimes and look at things and see how this puzzle creates the picture that it does. And we fail at doing that a lot.
We do.
So what I do a lot of times on TikTok, or what I try to do, is if somebody, comes at me sideways, sometimes I might cuss them out. It just depends on the day. But sometimes I do try to essentially hold their hand and zoom out. And, sometimes people will be like, oh, yeah, I understand that. A good example of this, okay? When that train, again, you can take this out and do whatever. But a good example of this is the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Okay, I made a video talking about that because people were asking me to repost and kind of like amplify the message. So I just made a video talking about like how great of an impact this has on the region, the people that live in this watershed and live downstream from that, and how this is going to impact them, not just the immediate area that it happened in.
Right.
And I had someone a couple of months later comment on a video of mine, and they were like, oh, I didn't know these were your thoughts about like the politics at the time. And I was like, what? And he was like, well, I followed you because you made a video talking about East Palestine. And I wanted to try to, keep up with that and figure out, what was going on up there. And I was like, when I made that video, I talked about the fact that deregulation is what led to that. I talked about the fact that people in power at that time busted up the union's ability to strike and fight for safer protections, because those safer protections protect not only them on the job site, but the communities that they have to work in and the people and the places along that path. That is political. And they were like, oh, I never did think about it that way. That's part of the zooming out and seeing the bigger picture that we all have to do sometimes. And that's not me saying like I always see the bigger picture. Sometimes I need my hand held to see different things from a different perspective. And be like, oh yeah, I really didn't think about it that way.
Same here. Yeah.
But those conversations are something that we have to have, whether it's something that we're seeing happen in front of our eyes and we're able to zoom out, or it's something that we're learning from that happened in the past and having to do the reflecting and thinking about, okay, well, this happened before. How do we navigate it today?
And there's so many lessons that can be learned from the way Lois organized, what she did in Harlan County. And I think that akin to that, you are doing the same thing on TikTok with digital organizing. I guess this is what we're calling it now. Digital organizing. So valuable because you reach so many people. And I really think it's so important to, like you said, correct the narratives that we see of Appalachia.
Yeah.
That is something I'm also hoping to do over time with this podcast, because specifically with women throughout the region, even the people that are from here don't really understand how important women have been for all these movements that we've seen and all the progress that we've seen in Appalachia, and how women really led the way.
It's lost stories, and I'm glad that you're here to tell it with the grace and the understanding that you have as someone who's done a lot of work yourself in the region. So I think it's beautiful, and it's something that's necessary. And I will be making my kids listen to this. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and for making the trip. And I hope I don't really know where TikTok is. I'm more of a scroller than a participant. I don't know what the band status is or anything like that. Like,
we're back for now.
Can't hold them down. So yeah, I'm so glad you're out there doing it. And if you have to move to Reels or wherever, personally, I'm hoping Blue Sky pops off a little bit, because I would love to just move away from all meta things. But wherever you end up, I will be there watching. And I'm also grateful that like TikTok even connected us in a way, because I was like, oh, I know her. Like, I saw you out like in public, in reality, in the real world.
In the real world.
Outside of TikTok. And I was like, oh my God, I know her, because like, yeah, she's so cool. And I want to talk to her and I want to know her. And like that, it's just, technology is amazing sometimes. Other times it sucks, but sometimes it's really good.
Well, the funny thing about that is, before I really was like, I mean, I guess I was kind of out there on TikTok in 2022, but like when the flooding happened and stuff like that, I was keeping up with things that you were doing because somebody had shared your post as like a place for resources or like where to send donations and things like that. And I was like, wow, she's really doing like amazing like work. And I don't know, it's just weird that you said that you were like, oh, I know you. But then it was the same thing for me. I was like, oh, that's Jessica. She did so much after the flood. Like,
oh, that's so cool.
So, yeah.
The internet, like I said, bringing us together, even though it is also sometimes not the greatest tool in the world. We're not used to this.
Well, depending on how you utilize it, I guess.
Yeah. Navigating propaganda, media literacy, whole other subject. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you haven't seen Harlan County, USA, do yourself a favor and do so as quickly as you can. It is a masterpiece. And it's also directed by a woman. Shout out to Barbara Koppel and her bravery in actually even making this piece. You can stream it on Max, and for those that appreciate physical media, it's part of the Criterion Collection. Thank you so much for listening. This podcast is produced and edited by me, Jessica Miles. Our artwork is created by Hayden Miles, and our theme music is produced by Kenny and Hayden Miles. If you'd like to support the show, you can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/Mountain Laurels Podcast. You can also follow the show on Instagram and Blue Sky. See you all next week.